we are going to remain unaffiliated forever as far as I'm concerned, because I've seen a lot of schools, either they came up under somebody and now they have their own school and they have really strong philosophical differences with that head instructor, and they have to put up with a bunch of bullshit just to get that next stripe on their belt, or they have to put up with a bunch of stuff because that instructor is the only person that can sign off on their athletes for IBJJF. Or even worse, they don't have somebody that they're affiliated with, and they have to connect to somebody that they don't know. And then before you know it, you got some 60-year-old creep that shows up to your school 2 times a year for seminars and is saying crazy shit, maybe hitting on female students or saying really inappropriate stuff or doing really inappropriate things.
Welcome to Forever White Belt. I'm your host, Adolfo Ferranda. And today I have the absolute pleasure of speaking with Josh Vogel, a third-degree Jiu Jitsu black belt, co-founder of the Jiu Jitsu Company in Old City, Pennsylvania, and the creator of the 90-day Project-Based Jiu Jitsu program. Josh has over 2 decades of experience on the mats, and his systematic project-based approach to learning Jiu Jitsu has helped countless practitioners make real, measurable progress. His program isn't just about technique. It offers a comprehensive experience that includes access to their own custom Jiu Jitsu app, making it an incredibly valuable resource for students looking to level up their game. In this episode, we dive deep into Josh's personal journey, including how he overcame being socially awkward as a youth and developed the communication and leadership skills necessary to become a successful gym owner and instructor. We also explore the unique challenge black belts face when it comes to promotion beyond black belt and how that impacts personal and professional growth. Additionally, we get into the pros and cons of a gym's decision to affiliate or remain independent and how that process has evolved over the years. Josh brings thoughtful insight into what it truly means to run a successful academy in today's jiu-jitsu landscape. This was an easy and enjoyable discussion filled with wisdom and honest reflection. And with that, I give you Josh Vogel. Josh, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So Josh, you are a third-degree black belt. Is it under multiple different people?
Yeah, so a third degree. I got my first 2 degrees at Balance Studios. My third degree is through Belt Checker, which is affiliated with like BJJ Globetrotters. So with Belt Checker, basically because degrees on black belt are 100% based on time spent at the belt, like active participation. I go through Belt Checker. They check to make sure that you're legit, and they have like standards that they follow where they'll check your background and make sure that you're just not making it up. And then when you're confirmed, then they'll send you a certificate.
Awesome. I had no idea. And I know so many black belts that are stuck in this position, like where they have no one to give them any more additional degrees and they have no idea how to go about it. And they, quite frankly, it comes to a point where they're like, I got 2 degrees, whatever, or maybe 1. And it's fantastic that there's another avenue for them. That's great. I had no idea.
Well, what I like about them is that I believe they started what they're doing because there are so many black belts that don't have a black belt above them to help promote them for whatever reason, whether it's like gym politics or disagreements or whatever. And so then you have all these black belts that are like the degrees don't really matter, like on a day-to-day functional perspective. Like no student has ever come to me and said, like, are you a second degree or are you a third degree? Because I might not sign up if you're only a second degree. Nobody really cares, but the only functional use of those things for me is through IBJJF. And so I'm doing the same thing with IBJJF as I'm going through them and getting my degrees certified. Because with IBJJF, you have to be a certain amount of degrees on your black belt in order to promote black belts to compete under their tournaments. So as far as functional perspective, I go through IBJJF. And then as far as just recognizing my degrees that don't really matter that much, I do it through Belt Checker.
Other black belts also have been concerned that their instructor is not staying on top of their degrees, and thus they won't be able to be, you know what I'm saying? So if I'm a first degree black belt, then I can't give you your second degree, right?
Yeah. And it's interesting because it's one of those things that outside of the sphere of IBJJF stuff, nobody really cares. Like, for example, I know 0 degree black belts that have given black belts to other people. And that's technically not legal to do in BJJ because you have to be a second degree or greater to give an actual black belt. But nobody cares. If you're a black belt and you give somebody else who deserves a black belt, nobody's going to give you a hard time about it. Nobody cares. Not even on Reddit is anybody going to say anything. And they say stuff on Reddit for literally everything. And so it's one of those situations where I've been training for 21 years or almost 22, I guess. And like there's sort of an old school stigma to stuff like that a little bit. But aside from that weird leftover stigma to putting a stripe on your own belt, nobody actually cares about that kind of stuff. Now, when it comes to like the actual belt colors, that's different because there's still a high expectation that if you're getting a blue belt from somebody, then that person should be like a purple belt or above. Like it's not like a blue belt is giving somebody else a blue belt, or a brown belt is giving somebody else a black belt, or a black belt is just putting their own black belt on with nobody giving it to them. But as far as stripes go, because with stripes, it's only time spent actively in the sport, nobody really cares.
So you are the co-owner of the Jiu Jitsu Company with your wife, Angie Vogel, and you're in Old City, Philadelphia, I believe.
Yep. Yeah, we're in Old City, 2nd Street, right on top of Insomnia Cookies between Market and Chestnut.
What made you want to follow Jiu Jitsu as a career?
So in the late 90s, I started doing some Kung Fu stuff. And like as soon as I found martial arts just in general, I knew that that's what I wanted to do for a living, because prior to that point, like I moved out of the house when I was 17 and I started working when I was 15. And so I was just sort of aimlessly doing, working in coffee shops and doing a little bit of construction, a little bit of painting and, just sort of odd jobs. And I didn't go to college, so I had zero direction in my life and I didn't have a career path. And then I found martial arts and I was like, okay, this is awesome. This is what I want to do. And so I did Kung Fu for a few years. And then in 2002 or 2003, I kind of stumbled across Jiu Jitsu. My brother was doing Shotokan karate. I was doing Kung Fu stuff. We used to spar all the time. And then we found a VHS tape of UFC 2. And we watched the VHS tape and then we started like wrestling with each other to like try to mimic what Royce was doing. And then as soon as we did that, it seemed really fun and it seemed effective. So then I took a jiu-jitsu class. And as soon as I took my first class, I was like, okay, cool. This is it. This is the final stop. This is what I'm going to do with my life.
And then you were raised by what, mom and dad or single parent or?
Yeah, so I was raised by a dad and a mom. And then when I was 16, my mom moved away and then my stepmom came into the picture.
So it sounds like you're very independent at a young age.
Yeah, independent, stubborn, didn't get along with my parents well. So I think it was wise for me to move out pretty close before my 18th birthday. So I got out pretty young.
Mm-hmm. I heard you mention before that I don't know if you're still interested in skateboarding. Like were you interested in back then in that culture?
Yeah, so I started skateboarding in 1989 and I was about 8 or 9 years old. And I just fell in love with it. And I moved to Philadelphia because of skateboarding. So when I was 15 or 16, I used to skip school and I would go skate in New York and I would go skate in Philly and like take the train back and forth. And all I wanted to do was just skateboarding from when I was like 8 years old until my teenage and young adult years. And then there's a certain point where you realize like with skateboarding, I was good at skateboarding, but I was never great at skateboarding. I could see that I wasn't going to be anywhere near a professional at skateboarding. And I was also like exceptionally socially awkward when I was younger. So doing any kind of networking and social stuff with skateboarders was like excruciating for me. So I was like, all right, I'm not that good at skateboarding and I don't really get along that great with skateboarders. So this is probably not my future career path.
What a dichotomy now to where you're at, like on podcasts and you having to communicate and being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I mean, jiu-jitsu, honestly, like getting involved in jiu-jitsu was so good for me socially. And, I really found my people in jiu-jitsu, whereas like I still skateboard and I still like talk to skateboarders and stuff sometimes, but I don't feel as if I'm part of a skateboarding community, even though I've been doing it for forever and I've been in Philadelphia forever and I know a lot of skateboarders here. But with jiu-jitsu, pretty much from the first day, I felt like, all right, these people are nuts, but they're my people.
I just spoke with Clark Gracie, and he mentioned that jiu-jitsu tends to bridge a lot of these personal gaps that we have. It's amazing that you bring up how it sort of helped you refine or develop this social aspect.
So I started working as a full-time jiu-jitsu instructor when I was like, I guess, a blue belt, almost purple belt. And so that was around 2006, 2007.
How old were you?
So I started when I was 23. And then by that point, I was like 25 or 26, I guess. So mid-20s. And I was less socially awkward than I was, when I was like 20, 15, 16. But, still not great with people. But then over the years, you refine your social skills by teaching jiu-jitsu, group classes, private lessons. And at least for me, like I wanted to be the best instructor possible. And there's no way to be a great instructor if people don't like you or you can't connect with people on a personal level. I mean, at least for me, maybe some people can pull that off. So I had to learn to get better and better and better at communicating one-on-one with people. And I like jujitsu people, so I wanted to be able to like connect with people better in that way too. But, you know, working full-time in jujitsu for many, many years and then opening my own school made it even better because with my own school, like any leftover personality quirks where like I'm pretty quiet and I tend to be a little standoffish sometimes, but I can't do that when I'm at my own school. I can't rub people the wrong way, so I have to be very careful to like develop better social skills every year and every month.
Being able to complete the climb to mastery requires the proper nutrition. This is why it's important to take in a potent blend of electrolytes that is in tune with your output and brings strength to your goals. This potent blend is only found in salt electrolytes.
That's fascinating because I've also spoke to individuals who are fantastic at jiu-jitsu, but they don't have the best social skills, but they do have dreams of teaching or opening an academy someday. And, you know, they say because of this gap, you know, they'd probably be unable to do that. So, you know, how did you develop, you know, the skills to teach and how did it evolve? And given that you self-admittedly say that, you know, there's a social awkwardness, I suppose that comes with some sort of social rejection sometimes too. So obviously your teaching is not for everyone. So how did you receive that and how did you push through that?
Basically, for me, my number one goal with teaching is to be like an effective teacher. And whatever goals my students have, whether when I used to do private lessons, whether it's group classes, seminars, whatever my students' goals are, to help them reach those goals in a way that is sustainable and enjoyable for them. And so the way I look at it is like, I can't have an ego problem with improving my social skills. So for example, if there's something that people don't like about me, it's not like fuck them or, you know, whatever. Like it's that they don't like this part of my personality. And that's a problem because that means that I can't help them to the best of my ability. So that means that's something about my personality that I have to change. And so what I try to do is over the years, noticing, okay, well, I can be socially awkward about like eye contact, or maybe I don't know how to keep like small talk rolling as well as I could. And that doesn't set people at ease when I'm working with them. So I had to get better, figure out like, okay, well, how can I relax a little bit and stop being so weird? And like, you know, not to be too blunt about it, but you know, I catch myself being weird and like, you know, not saying stuff when I should be saying something or doing things that maybe make people feel not at ease. So then I have to like be honest with myself and reflect on that and then try to improve those skills just with practice and feedback. And then my wife is very, very social, and she's been a jiu-jitsu instructor for almost a decade now. And we own the school together. And she's been fantastic for me because I can see how people connect to her. And she's such a warm, friendly, people like being around her. And even when she's like breaking people's stones a little bit and giving them like joking with them, she's got such a good gift for making people feel comfortable and at ease and connecting with them. So I try to learn a lot from her, and she's good about giving me feedback. You know, for example, if I'm in class and I'm talking too long and I can see that people are like zoning out, like she is good at like getting me to realize like, all right, you know, shut up, you're going overboard.
What makes a great teacher, instructor?
So I think there's a lot of things. As an owner of a jiu-jitsu school, and I teach the majority of the advanced classes at the school, for me, the job is I have to be able to organize curriculums for my students. So that's the first thing, is just the technical information that I'm passing on to other people. And so part one is organizing curriculums in such a way where I have to factor in, if I'm designing a fundamentals curriculum, the fundamentals curriculum has to be stuff that is relevant to what the students are going to be using when they actually start sparring on the mat. It's got to be stuff that keeps them safe, so they're not like tearing each other's shoulders apart in a fundamentals class, and then later on in advanced jiu-jitsu. It's got to be stuff that scales up to higher levels. So if I design a fundamentals curriculum, I call them seed techniques, where I'll teach, there's techniques in there that if they learn this in the fundamentals class, like a tripod sweep, for example, it makes it so much easier for them later on to learn how to do single leg X, de la Rivas, things like that scale up. And so there's the technical information, and making sure that the technical information isn't just the lesson of the day, but it's stuff that will scale up and then transfer to their future learning in jiu-jitsu and make all that stuff easier and more enjoyable. And then there's the social part of it, which is, I guess the best way to put it is coming at it from a hospitality approach, like one would if it was like a restaurant or, Angie and I we always joke that we want our school to be like a small bed and breakfast hut kind of feel, like where you go to New Hampshire or something and there's like a little mom and pop bed and breakfast and you go there and the owners come out and they're like, hi, I'm, June and Todd and welcome to our bed and breakfast. And like they make you feel welcome. And so there's like the hospitality aspect to it where when you're teaching, you're connecting with the students, you're trying to keep the vibe lighthearted enough where the students are like enjoying themselves and they don't feel stressed out after they just spent, 10 hours at work with a boss that they hate. They come into the gym and they're like laughing and having fun, but they're also getting good work in. And then there's also the communication part of teaching, which is a little bit different than the technical information. And it's not quite the social hospitality aspect, but it's like, what is the wording that you use when you explain the lesson of the day to somebody? How do you keep your group instruction short enough where people can get your point, but you're not sitting there for 18 minutes and people are like, oh my God, is this dude ever going to shut up? Right. So like being able to like get your point across in a very succinct way, get bullet points across, and then communicate more advanced stuff to different, like when you go around and correct everybody one-on-one. And so there's an art to that aspect of the communication when you're coaching too.
Wow. That's really tough to scale. It sounds like.
It's tough. Yeah. But I try to, like I think we have 7 or 8 fundamentals, kids, and takedowns instructors. So we have a number of other instructors at the gym. And so I try to get as much time with them as possible, helping mentor them with how to coach properly and how to teach well. I try not to be overbearing where I'm like, make sure you do this and not that all the time. And like, I don't breathe down their necks all the time, but I try to make sure that they're following the path that I envision for our jiu-jitsu school and like expressing themselves. But I make sure that we're all on the same page as far as how to teach.
I love your bed and breakfast analogy as well. It's absolutely brilliant.
Thank you.
I've heard another speaker, Simon Sinek, give an analogy before where he stayed at a couple different hotels, one very high end and one sort of, claiming to be high end, but more sort of mid range or something. And every morning he would get some coffee from a barista who happened to work at both hotels. And the one at the lower end hotel, he would order coffee from him and the guy would be just sort of quiet or whatever. And then he went to the really nice one. And then the guy was like more jovial and stuff like that. And he's like, hey, what makes you so happy about, working at this particular place and serving your coffee like this and just making me feel good and all this stuff. And he's like, well, at my other job, whenever my manager walks around, they're always pointing out things that I'm doing wrong or they want something better or quicker or something like that. Whereas at my other really high-end hotel, when the manager walks around, he's like, hey, Kevin, do you need anything? Do you need more cups? And then they let me be a little more autonomous. So it's just fascinating, all these little nuances that can make just a world of difference.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because like that's a good example of, sort of how like the instructors that work at my school that teach the fundamentals classes and takedowns and kids and stuff like that, like we all follow the same umbrella philosophy of how to teach and I try to mentor them. But then what's cool is that they have their own personalities. Obviously, they're their own people. They're all fantastic. And, I have so much faith in them. And what's great is that like I can coach them and mentor them to become better instructors. But I love that they have their own, like, for example, one of the instructors, Tanner, has very much a vibe when you go to his class of like a maitre d' at a nice restaurant, like welcome to Chez Gateau or whatever. And like, here's the menu, and he's very like calm, but you're riveted by what he's saying because he's so good at making you feel welcome in his class. He sets everybody at ease really well, but he's also got great technical information, and it's very like high-end jiu-jitsu that he conveys. That's like the vibe that he gives off. And then one of the other instructors who's teaching exactly the same class is Suyi, and she gives off a vibe of like Food Network, like you're on like a Top Chef or something like that, and she's like Padma Lakshmi, like that sort of like fun but like also professional and like gets the point across and keeps everybody engaged, but same material, different vibe because her personality's different. It's really cool to see them all feel comfortable to express themselves within the structure of our way of teaching. And so like what you were saying about the barista at one place, they might feel like they have a manager or a coffee shop owner that's like overbearing and like, okay, this nothing's ever right. They want it done this way all the time, and they feel like they can't express themselves. So I try to avoid that kind of thing and make sure that my presence is felt and make sure we're all on the same page, but then allow them to express themselves in their own teaching.
This is fascinating discussion because it really translates into your end product, right? In a lot of different ways. Yeah, as you were mentioning, you do have to kind of corral it so it obviously doesn't get to extremes. But what's really cool about it is that you do have different sort of flavors of different offerings of different products that you're delivering to your customers. I mean, that's fantastic. And then you do find some students resonate with different instructors more than, hey, I'm going to go to, X's class versus Y's class, or maybe switch back and forth or whatever it may be.
Well, and what's interesting about that is like a lot of our instructors are still participating in group classes together. And so like, even if, for example, Ashley and Nicole are our kids instructors, and they're such like energetic, lively personalities that like the adults don't go to the kids classes. So it's very rare. Like you'll never see one of the fundamental, like the beginner adult students going into a kids class to take one of their classes. But because Ashley and Nicole participate in the group classes, they're able to express their personalities as instructors and mentors in the group classes, and new students, they just love them. So like every time a new student comes in the door and they're partnered up with Ashley or Nicole, like they're just super psyched about jiu-jitsu afterwards. And so it's cool because the instructor's role, it doesn't just stay like in the box of their own class, but the instructor's role on the training floor, helping new students and influencing new students, it's felt in every part of the school.
What's also fascinating me is, as someone who wasn't the most socially adept young individual, that now you are able, and have you always been able to discern and witness and process the way these other people are executing their own social behavior and how they engage with people?
Yeah. Well, so I think one of the things that I'm good at is learning from mistakes. And so like, and I'm good at observing other people and like I can learn from my own mistakes, and I can also see like, all right, like I see this jiu-jitsu school owner, they're completely alienating their students, like just don't do that. And so what I try to do is when I'm watching people, I'll see people who have these social skills that I admire, like Mikhail in the Footlocks class is just, he's a very great public speaker. So then if I watch him or I watch Ashley or Nicole or any of them, I can say, okay, they're very powerful speakers and people want to listen to them. And what is it that makes that happen? Is it confidence? Or are they speaking and they don't like, there's not a lot of pauses in their speech, like a lot of ums and ahs. And, what is it about their speaking that makes them effective when they're teaching a group class? And then is that something that I can take on? And then the other side is like, if I see somebody teaching and the students aren't clicking with it, then what is the mistake there that I can learn from? And then when I see myself in my own group classes and I see the students kind of losing interest, or I'm not able to convey to them the things, like they're not getting what I'm saying, then I try to look at myself and say, okay, what mistakes am I making right here where I could do a better job getting through to the student? Because I'm obviously not doing a good enough job right now. So I'm usually looking for mistakes, and I'm also looking for like just specific behaviors, like whether it's like, oh, Mikhail is very confident when he speaks, so maybe I should do more of that.
A lot of what we're discussing is a lot of behind the scenes type of stuff and sort of pre-planning or processing sort of stuff you need to do. Are you setting some sort of formal time within the week, or is this sort of inspiration that comes to you to execute all this stuff?
It's more just a habit that I have, like where there's a certain amount of like regimented scheduling that goes on in my lifestyle, but I don't work really well with over-regimented, like, okay, from 7 to 7:30, I'm going to observe this instructor speaking, and then at 7:45, I'm going to go sit down and do 2.5 hours of film study. And then like, it's a mix of having like a rough framework of a schedule that I try to keep, and then giving myself flexibility to be inspired and go with that. So for example, like if for tomorrow is going to be one of my busier days, so I'm going to wake up, I'm going to have my coffee. I'm going to go teach class at 12. I'm going to clean the gym, teach class at 12. I have my projects that I'm working on the mat. And then there's going to be a certain amount of time where if I'm motivated, I'm going to do some film study. If I'm not motivated, then I have to do my sprints. So maybe I'll go do my sprints and then wait for the motivation to do film study later on. At nighttime, I'll poke my head in and I'll watch George's takedowns class, and I'll see what kind of inspiration I get from that. And so there's a schedule and there's a framework, but I'm also going to go with whatever I'm inspired by at certain points. There's a little bit of flexibility there.
I want to get to the academy and your offerings as well with the Jiu Jitsu Company. I love your website, by the way. I think it's the only one that I've seen where people actually use animation on the homepage, which is super cool. Are you a designer? Or how'd you guys come up with that fun, sort of clever thing?
Well, the inspiration for that video, there's a skateboard company called Magenta, which they're based out of France. And I really love their graphic design and I love their advertisements, and everything they do is just so cool to me. And so I saw an advertisement that they did where they used an animation style like that, where they were skating through a city like Lyon or something like that in France. And I was like, that would be so cool to do something like that for our school. And so then I showed it to my wife because she's the one that brings things to life. So then she took the idea and she ran with it. And we have this guy, Josh, he did the design work and he does like our videography sometimes. So she asked him if he could make a video, like a jiu-jitsu video for our school based on that skateboarding video. And with a little bit of feedback from us, he was able to produce that. And then Angie does all the design for the website, all the Instagram stuff, all the merch. Like she designs everything.
Just a reminder to please give us a 5-star review on Apple Music and Spotify and become a VIP member for only 99 cents a month. Get ad-free episodes at anchor.fm/foreverwhitebelt/subscribe. And check us out on Instagram at Forever White Belt Show. Go buy your Forever White Belt swag at teespring.com/forever-white-belt. Check us out on YouTube now at Forever White Belt. Finally, if you ever get to beautiful Northern California, please come roll with us at North Bay Jiu Jitsu in Marin County, just north of San Francisco. They're amazing instructors and everyone there are great people. Mention the podcast and get 2 weeks free.
You guys offer so much too. Looking on the website, Muay Thai and some judo stuff, and obviously you work on wrestling stuff and yoga and weightlifting with these various templates. And you also have an app, which is very interesting that you guys offer, and affiliation as well. I mean, that's a lot of stuff. And I'm sure I'm probably leaving out some stuff too. How do you manage all that? And how'd you guys execute all that?
I do the product of the jiu-jitsu at our school is mainly what I'm responsible for. So designing the curriculums for fundamentals, advanced classes, kids programs, etc. And then teaching a lot of the classes in addition to our instructor staff. And then she does all the marketing. She got the partnership with Wodify to create the app. She does all the technology stuff. She does the website. She does the billing stuff. She makes deals with different companies to work together with like Yoga for BJJ, or she got our yoga instructor to come in and we have a good partnership with her. So she does a lot of that kind of stuff. She just does a fantastic job. We both have a very strong work ethic. So basically, like, we don't really have hobbies. Like, I skateboard a couple times a week, but like really my hobby is jiu-jitsu and her hobby is doing stuff that makes the business better. And so when we're at work, we're at work. And then when we're at home, I'm studying jiu-jitsu footage. She's designing t-shirts. She's making deals with Wodify to upgrade the app. Like it's kind of our whole lifestyle. It's a lot of stuff, but this is our only job. And we're both used to working really, really hard. She comes from the restaurant industry. And so she was working 70, 80 hours a week for most of her life. And I've been working, 2-3 jobs at a time since I was like 15. So we're both used to working like long days. So the way I look at it is like, we do a lot of work and we do everything at our school, but what else are we doing?
What is the culture at the school?
Yeah. So basically the culture is friendly. We make sure that everybody feels welcoming, comfortable. We train hard and we also train safe and we train fun. I know it's kind of the same stuff that everybody says, but if you look at our social media, some people have more of like a pit bull fight kind of vibe. Some people have more of like a fun, more jovial kind of vibe. Some people have more of like a strict, like samurai kind of vibe. And so for us, we're like fun. We train hard. We train fun. We have a naturally respectful culture. So like, it's not the kind of thing where you don't have to like bow when you get on the mat or look away when you're tying your belt or anything, but there's a natural respect that everybody has for each other, where it's really emphasized that we're always looking for out for each other's safety. If there's a problem, we're always trying to communicate the problem with each other so that it doesn't become a big problem. It's just like a natural, civilized, respectful, fun, hard training, enjoyable training floor. I think that's kind of what I think of when I think of the culture of the school.
So what does your demographic look like?
Mostly people that are between 22 to 40, I guess. Like that's the majority, maybe 22 to like 38. And then we have people that are a little bit younger, a little bit older, but I think the majority of students are somewhere within that demographic. Young, working professionals, pretty much like all walks of life as far as like types of people. We try to make sure everybody knows overtly that they're welcome at our school. And like, for example, we had an event called the Big Gay Open Mat, which was like for our LGBTQ friends, like to, and like we'll do things where we make sure that people know that people from different walks of life and different lifestyles, personality types, different whatever are actively welcome at our school. Because I think a lot of people feel like I've seen school owners before where they're like, yeah, of course everybody's welcome. But the people that are looking from the outside don't see that. They might see the marketing and they might see the way that the school is presenting itself and go, ooh, that doesn't look like it's for me. So we try to be good about making sure that everybody from different social circumstances and different walks of life actively look at our school from the outside and say, hey, that looks like a place where I would have fun and I would feel welcome.
Yeah. And I think I was pretty impressed with what you'd mentioned before, your female representation as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think our student base is about 30% female. I think we have more female instructors than male instructors. It's at least 50-50, I think. Yeah, my wife, she's a very strong presence in the school. She's a black belt. She teaches classes. We have multiple female instructors. We have a lot of female black belts. Like I think maybe 6 or 7 female black belts right now. And then there's going to be more coming in the next year or so. So yeah, it's a very strong female presence.
So let's assume I'm a day one white belt and I'm walking into your door. What is my experience?
Okay, so you walk in the door, you go up the stairs, and you get to the top of the stairs and you look around a little bit, and then either I or my wife are there to greet you. And so when you come in, go, hey, very friendly, make sure that you feel welcome, try to crack a little bit of jokes just to sort of break the ice a little bit. And then, we give you a tour of the school, make sure you sign the waiver, give you a tour of the school, show you the bathroom, maybe offer some gummy bears. We have a gummy bear dispenser, like right at the front door. That's kind of our thing. We go through hundreds of pounds of gummy bears a year, but like that's a nice, friendly, welcoming kind of thing from the school. Introduce you to everybody, take you on a tour through the school, maybe explain a little bit of the features of the school, give you a sense of what the class you're going to be participating is like, and then hop into class, introduce them to the instructor, and then the instructor takes it from there and makes sure that they feel welcome and that they're partnered up with somebody that's appropriate for them.
I've heard you mention before the criteria for belting. You've sort of went through it. And also, do you do belt testing?
We don't do belt testing. We're active with all of our students. I train with, and Angie trains with, and all of our instructors train with all of the students in the entire school, like on a regular basis. And we communicate with everybody. And then I'm also always listening to the discussions that people are having about jiu-jitsu, which is kind of an important thing because, so with the belt promotion standards, my goal by the time somebody gets to black belt is for them to be an intelligent, self-teaching jiu-jitsu person. So somebody who can think intelligently about jiu-jitsu, design their own training programs, and then teach themselves, like if they want to learn K-guard and they don't know anything about K-guard, they know how to gather information, organize the information into a system, turn that system into a program for themselves where they can actually get better at the stuff. And then if they need to, teach that information later on. And so with the belt promotion standards from day one, everything is organized where a white belt going to blue belt, the technical requirement is that they know one technique from every major position. And there's skill requirement and there's time spent at the belt that we factor in. So it's not just technical information, but the goal is to start them off at the very beginning, thinking about how to organize their jiu-jitsu. And then as the belts go up, it's focusing more on troubleshooting and gathering information from their training sessions and then creating projects out of their jiu-jitsu so that if I know that I am not good at side control escapes and that bucket is missing from my white belt to blue belt curriculum, then I need to make a project out of side control escapes and how do I organize that information? How do I troubleshoot? And so what I was saying about me listening to people's conversations is it's not that I'm nosy. It's that when I listen to people talk about jiu-jitsu, I'm listening to see how they're thinking about what they're doing. So if I listen to 2 white belts in the locker room or in the lobby talking about their training session, I'm hearing these white belts say stuff like, yo, when I was on top of you in side control, that was really cool how you were framing on my hip with your right hand. I really couldn't get my hip to your hip. Like, how do you do that? And they're having a technical discussion off the training floor, and it shows me that they clearly understand what's happening on the mat. Whereas in the past, when I would listen to white belts talk about jiu-jitsu, it was like, yo, that was a tough roll, man. What were you doing there? And like, I don't know. I was just trying to get on top of you. Like, I'm listening for like intelligent discussion about jiu-jitsu. And that means that the way that my teachers are teaching is effective. And that means that they're on the right track.
How are you teaching the teachers?
So originally, when I was training the teachers to do the fundamentals program, I was teaching all the fundamentals classes. So I would have them work with me in fundamentals classes for 3 months. And they were all purple belts at this point in time. So they already had years of experience doing jiu-jitsu.
Mm-hmm.
But I was training them like almost like trailing at a restaurant, like when, wait staff is teaching a new server how to do, learn the ropes. So I would have them trail me in the fundamentals classes, and I would work with them individually on the mechanical parts of the curriculum, how they should be teaching it. So making sure that they're not speaking too much, making sure that they give like, these are the bullet points I would like you to hit when you're teaching the group. These are the things I would like you to say. Like if there's a blue belt in your class, then give them more technical information. If there's a brand new white belt, here's how you can simplify the information to make them feel like it's something that they can get good at. So it was a lot of on-the-job mentorship like that. And then I also try to meet up with them pretty regularly to give them feedback about their instruction, and then see if they have any thoughts of their own about how they would like to approach teaching. Like if they have ideas about how the class could be better, then I'll make sure I hear them out. And then we discuss if they want to add more warm-ups or something like that, or if they want to take warm-ups out of the class, or if they want to teach something a certain way. I make sure that I'm there so that we can bounce ideas off each other. So that would be the basic process of teaching the instructors.
One thing I want to talk about also is the app a little bit more. What does the app offer? And when I'm talking about app, it's the mobile application, tablet, whatever it may be. Can you expand on what it is and what is in there?
So this is cool. So a new student comes in and they're taking the fundamentals class. And when they're taking the class, let's say I have Sui teaching the class. She does the instruction. She shows the technique of the class for that day. Everybody splits off. They're working with their partner. We have 2 TV screens on the main mat. And on the TV screens, the technique that Sui just taught is on a loop because we've pre-filmed everything. So for example, if you're partnered up with somebody and Sui is on the other side of the room helping correct somebody else, and you're like, yo, I can't remember where I put my hand. Like, do I put my hand here or there? You can look at the TV. Or let's say you get to class 5 minutes late, you get stuck in traffic and you're not sure, you want to hop in, but you don't know what's going on. You can always look at the TV and say, oh, they're doing the Kimura from close guard today. That's where I got to put my hand. This is what we're doing. And then the way that interacts with the app is that on the app, all of the fundamentals program videos are on the app so that after class, if you want to go look and review what we did for the day, you can look at the video and you can take your own notes on the video. All of my advanced curriculums, so if I do a 6-week block of long distance guard passing, we film all of those videos so the students can see on the app if they miss a class, like let's say they miss week 3 of the 6-week curriculum, they can always look at the app and say, oh yeah, on week 3, Josh taught this. Therefore, when we do week 4, I can make sure that I'm caught up and I can see what we did for that day. I could take notes on it. They can send me messages on the app if they want and ask questions. So it's pretty cool.
That is very cool. So you do then sort of pre-publish the curriculum. So I could, in theory, plan out in advance, maybe some additional context in whatever you're going to cover in a week or 2 weeks out or something like that.
Well, yeah. So we don't like for the fundamentals curriculum, everything is pre-recorded and you can look at, for example, if we're in week 3 of fundamentals, you can always go out to week 6 and see what we're going to do in week 6. In the advanced classes, we don't we film the videos the day of, and then we publish them later on that day. So it's not all filmed in advance for the advanced classes. It's just that Angie will film my class and then edit the videos so that it's watchable later on that day.
Yeah, that makes sense. That would be insane to do all of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And also too, like with the advanced stuff, like we do operate on a pretty tight schedule, but it would be hard to film everything in advance. And there are times where if I see that the class needs something different than what I had taught, like let's say I'm teaching the same thing at 12 noon as I am at 7 p.m., then I might see that the 7 p.m. class needs something slightly different than what the 12 noon class needed. And so I'll take the curriculum that we did earlier in the day and I'll modify it a little bit for the 7 p.m. class because I want to make sure that I'm not just like, cut and pasting 12 noon and 7 p.m., but I'll change it a little bit so that I can give them what they need for that class. So if I pre-recorded everything, there wouldn't be enough flexibility to adjust to the class that comes in.
So I'm going to ask you a hard left turn question here. Can you give me a fondest childhood memory?
So this is kind of weird. I grew up in New Jersey. I moved to New Jersey when I was 9, and I lived there from 9 to 17. And I think my best childhood memories are like playing in the sewers of New Jersey. Like it sounds disgusting, right?
I've done the same. I know what you mean.
Yeah, like it's like I sound like I'm like a Ninja Turtle or something. But like there was like a housing complex that we lived in, and a little bit outside of the housing complex, there were these like sewers, and they would slope down, and in the wintertime there would be snow, and it would turn into like a big ramp, but the sewer was in the middle, like the draining for the sewer. And so we would go and take our skateboard decks and we would take the wheels and trucks off and we would just go snowboarding and like, crash all over the place and like go and explore in the sewers. And the reason I'm bringing that up is like, it's weird that a good childhood memory would be playing in the sewers of New Jersey. But to me, when I think about that, I think about like the adventure of like, oh man, like there's the sewer, it's dark, what's in there? Like me and my friends would like psych each other up, like, no, you go in first, like that kind of stuff. And like me and my little brother, we would try to like knock our friends over, like when we would snowboard down the hills of the sewer. Like we would have one kid sit in the middle and we would try to like crash into him and knock him over, like just dumb kid stuff like that. But that's like the first memory that pops into my head.
Can you give me like a jiu-jitsu aha moment that you've had?
I think a big aha moment for me was when I completely dove into looking at jiu-jitsu as a sport. And I stopped thinking about jiu-jitsu as like a sort of nebulous kind of sport, kind of martial art, kind of craft sort of thing. For me, just narrowing it down to looking at jiu-jitsu as a sport made everything so much simpler for me, because when I look at jiu-jitsu as a sport, then I can look at other sports and see what makes those sports successful. So I can look at when a basketball coach coaches basketball athletes, what are the qualities that they're looking for in an athlete? How do they develop athletes from this level to this level? How do they break skills down with like footwork and dribbling, and how do they train those skills? And it doesn't mean that I don't think about self-defense or fighting stuff or whatever. It just means that like if I look at jiu-jitsu like a sport, then I can take all those elements of like, fighting and self-defense and whatever, and I can look at those from the same framework of skill development, physical development, and athlete development that a high school football coach would look at or a high school basketball coach would look at.
Honing your product in.
Yeah. And so like if I'm looking, so if I wanted to teach somebody like from a self-defense perspective or fighting perspective, right? And I'm thinking about jiu-jitsu as a sports coach, then I would say, okay, what do sports coaches do, right? They look at film, they have training practices, they make sure that there's physical preparation, and they make sure there's an organized curriculum to get an athlete from this point to that point. So if I have somebody that's interested, maybe they work at nightclubs and they get in a lot of fights at nightclubs because they're a bouncer at nightclubs, then I would say, okay, well, let's look at some footage. Like, what does it look like when a fight actually happens in a nightclub? And what are the things that you have to worry about? So if we look at footage, we see there's one guy arguing with another guy, 3 guys start jumping that dude, they knock him down on the ground, security grabs one of the guys, one guy pulls a knife out and starts stabbing the security guy. Like, these are the things that happen when you watch footage. And then you can say, okay, so if I'm a bouncer at a nightclub and I'm trying to prepare for something like this, then what are the skills that I need to have to be prepared for this? What are the things that I have to worry about? How can I create a training program to go from where I'm at right now, which is unprepared, to being prepared for grabbing 3 guys and trying to pull them off of one guy that they're stomping? Or how do I approach those 3 guys not knowing if any of them have knives or not? Looking at it from a sports, maybe by sport coach, I mean like an organized perspective. But to me, like a sports coach just sort of covers the idea that I'm trying to get at with that. Like, jiu-jitsu is usually like, okay, this is self-defense. Here's some knife defenses. Here's like, if they throw a sucker punch at you, you prayer hands, block the sucker punch. But then if you watch actual violent encounters happen, you're trying to fit techniques that already exist into a violent encounter instead of watching the violent encounter and then preparing for what you see on video and then building programs that get you ready for that.
Your Fanatics offering 90-day project-based jiu-jitsu. Before we fall into that, I think you get to a point where you question how can we improve this delivery of information, right? The teaching of jujitsu and what we traditionally have been given, whether it be like 3 techniques, all right, go. And that was probably an improvement on something that was even previous to that, right? Whereas like, let's just get together and beat each other up or something like that, or challenge each other, whatever it may be. Did you have that when you were developing this? And because I've seen various attempts at sort of different things, like I mentioned before, like the upside down classroom, now we see ecological approach to it. You mentioned professional athletics in terms of how we can implement sort of those techniques and strategies to better inform or teach or develop individuals. Did you come across that mindset as well?
So when I was a blue belt, I think that was when I first got I caught the bug of thinking about organizing jiu-jitsu, because when I first started jiu-jitsu, it was kind of just like you go to class, you learn 3 random moves that your instructor wants to show that day, and then you go spar. And so there was sort of a sense of these are basic skills that we got to learn, but it wasn't really an organized thing. And I really struggled with that approach a lot. And so I started thinking, okay, well, this doesn't make sense to me. So how could I make this make sense? And then over the years, from different influences, I saw somebody made a flow chart of jiu-jitsu, and I was like, oh, okay, that's a way to organize it. So let me grab that piece right there. And then I saw Eddie Bravo's book where he started organizing stuff into systems. Like, this is where you go for the meat hook, and this is where blah, blah, blah. If they do this, I do that. I'm like, okay, cool. Let me grab that idea, and I'll put that into the flowchart thing. And then over the years, you see different influences. And then there's the trends in learning. There was Malcolm Gladwell's deliberate practice stuff for a while, and Anders Ericsson. And then there's the hot button, the new cool learning methods things that pop up every once in a while. Like Kit Dale doesn't do any drilling. Let's just do positional sparring and deliberate practice. And so I would grab ideas from this and grab ideas from that and grab ideas from ecological approach and gradually kind of cobble together my own coaching system. And, and then you get Danaher, who is all about systematic, if this, then that systems of jiu-jitsu. And so the way I look at it is it's not best for my students if I marry myself to any one thing. I don't want to be the deliberate practice guy. I want to be a coach that has a toolbox that can help my students get better using those different tools. And for some people, having an understanding of an ecological perspective on jiu-jitsu, like constraints-based learning, that will make them better. So I should know something about that stuff. And for other people, doing high rep drilling with their training partners and with their dummies and with the right intensity and with the right deliberate practice kind of mindset, that might be a better tool for those particular students. And so I feel like my job is to cobble together a pretty diverse toolbox and then have an understanding of when to apply those tools to different students based on what works best for them.
You're instructional. It seems like a lot of these different ways of, whether it's eco or whatever it may be, can sit underneath what you're offering within that, what you're delivering. And correct me if this isn't right. It seems to be a bit more macro, right?
So there's 2 things that make up that 90-day BJJ instructional. One of them is, I think every single jiu-jitsu person on earth has had the experience of going into class and be like, hey, what are you working on today, to their training partner? And then during an open mat, are you working on arm bars right now or something? And they're like, yeah, I'm working on choi bars, right? And everybody's always working on something. But what does that mean? Does it just mean that you're going to spam arm bars during open mat to all your training partners? There's got to be a better way than just spamming stuff. So then what's the better way than just spamming stuff? Okay, well, I'm going to try to do arm bars from this position to my training partners. How do I get to that position? And then once you start asking those kind of questions, that's how, if you go far enough down that rabbit hole of thought, you end up with an organized system for breaking down project that you want to work on. So I start off with, I'm going to work on arm bars. And then instead of just spamming them, it's okay, for 30 days, I'm just going to work on entries into the armbar position that I want to work on. And then I'm going to work on controlling the armbar position. And then I'm going to worry about finishing the armbar and then auxiliary paths if the finishes don't work. And then you start going, okay, well, that sounds cool. That's organized, but how long should I do this for? And you're like, okay, 30, 60, or 90-day blocks, because this gives you X amount of time to work on it. So it's taking that idea of what do you want to work on and turning that into an organized process that you can follow. And the second influence to that is when I used to teach private lessons, my goal was always to give the best possible experience to my students and help them with their goals. So if I had a new private student come to me and I would say, okay, what are the goals? What would you like to get out of doing these private lessons? because if I'm charging this person $100 or $150 for an hour of my time, that's a lot of money. So I want to make sure they're getting something out of it. And they would say, okay, my goal is to develop a thorough underhook half guard system that I can make work against most of my brown belt level training partners in a 6-month period of time. Cool. Now we have very tangible goals to work towards. So then we would start off with, how do I enter into underhook half guard? How do I control the position? How do I finish the underhook half guard? Am I trying to take the back? Am I trying to sweep from it? Am I trying to go to triangles or whatever? And then let's break that down. What are the problems I'm coming across at each phase? So if I get you an underhook half guard, you're going to throw a whizzer. You're going to use the whizzer to shuck me forward or maybe go to a front headlock. How do I solve those problems? And so doing the troubleshooting phase. And then when I was doing the private lessons with people, I would be rolling with them the entire time while they're working on this project. So me as a training partner, if I'm teaching you underhook half guard and we're in the entry phase, I would show you maybe 3 or 4 different entries into underhook half guard. I would have you do them to me, and then I would gradually give you more and more resistance so that you start to feel challenged. Like, okay, you're on bottom of side control and you catch my leg and you pull my leg into half guard and you're starting to get the underhook, but I'm framing on you and I'm stopping you from getting that shoulder close to me. How do you deal with that problem? And then maybe the next week I give you a little bit more resistance, a few different problems that you might come across against like blue or purple belt training partners. And then over the course of 6 months, I would guide that private student from a beginner's level half guard to a more advanced level half guard just by incrementally adding resistance and adding more advanced problems to the entry, control, and finishing phase problems. And then I thought, okay, well, this is working really, really well when I teach private lessons because I was getting very good results from people. And so I thought, okay, well, if I were going to make an instructional out of this, what would that look like? And then that eventually turned into the 90-day BJJ thing.
I've heard you mention something that you've termed sort of maintenance mode before when in training. What is it? And what are the other sort of modes of training to you?
There's a lot of ways to answer that question. So if we're talking from a 90-day BJJ perspective, like the instructional, I'm talking about maintenance mode as, if let's say you train 3 times a week, right? And if you're working on a new project, then how much of your training time do you want to devote to that new project? So if you're working on underhook half guard and you train 3 times a week and you do 5 rolls per open mat during those 3 days a week, that's 15 rolls a week that you're doing, 5 minutes each roll. So do you want to spend all of those training sessions only doing underhook half guard? And if you do, and you do that for 90 days, the rest of your jiu-jitsu is going to fall apart, right? Because that's 3 months that you haven't done your takedowns, you haven't done your side control escapes, you haven't done your back position attacks. So maintenance mode would be, how much time do I devote to a new project? So if I'm training 3 days a week and I'm doing 5 rolls per open mat and I'm doing those for 5-minute rolls, then maybe I would do 30% of that time working on underhook half guard with training partners that I can play that with. And then I spend the other 70% of that time keeping the rest of my jiu-jitsu in maintenance mode so it doesn't atrophy too much. So I want to make sure all those, my open guard muscles and my long range guard passing and my close range guard passing and my top of the mount position muscles don't atrophy.
Yeah, everyone gets injured to some extent. And let's say I got a bum shoulder, bum knee, lower back, or what may be. How can I train? How should I execute this as well?
Mm-hmm. So if you're working around injury, it's funny because I almost always stick to a curriculum in class, but I taught a one-off class last week about how to train with injuries. And it got mixed reviews. There were some people in the class that were like, just show me an arm bar, all right? I don't want to do this. But there were other people that were into it without giving medical advice. Like if you are well enough to actually get on a mat and try to do stuff, then there's always a way to work around an injury. For me, for example, if I have neck problems, then I'm going to spend more time doing footlock, drilling, and positional sparring because that keeps my head really far away from anybody's grips. And I'm going to focus specifically on not having my partner get on top and stack me to get out of footlocks. I might have them do more spinning escapes, or I might have them do more hand fighting or counter footlocking me. But I would ask them not to get on top of me and stack me to get out of the footlock positions. And so that would be one example of how I can still get on the mat and get good productive work that allows me to stay safe with my neck. And that involves having training partners that I trust and are willing to work with me, which kind of get back to the culture issue that you asked about. When you were asking me what the culture of the school is like, good school culture makes all that other stuff possible. So if you have training partners you trust, you can do that with. I do a lot of shadow grappling. So if I'm feeling busted up, like for example, I had a rough training day yesterday and my body's pretty beat up. Well, I'm not injured. Let's say I feel like I'm on the cusp of injury. Then I would do shadow grappling and do that in a couple of different ways where I could either do shadow grappling like hit training style, where I do like maybe 30 seconds of intense shadow grappling and then 30 seconds of relaxed and then do that for a 5-minute round or 2 5-minute rounds. I could do shadow grappling where I'm going at a medium pace and I'm focused on just envisioning a training partner, slap hands, fist bump, take 2 steps back, 1 step to the left, shoot to pull guard. I get them in daily Hiva guard. I off balance them forward. They post their left hand on the mat. I jump triangle. They pull the elbow back in. I go to, baby bolo or something. You could do shadow grappling where you're just drilling one technique over and over and over again, or you could mix all of those things together. And that's kind of a good way to stay safe because your shadow is not going to hurt you when you're shadow grappling, right?
Yeah. I love that you also mentioned communication. Like you were in that example, you're like, I'm going to talk to my partner. Hey, can you not stack me? It's missing in a lot of gyms, I think, is just that simple thing.
Yeah. And, honestly, I mean, I feel like so many of the problems that I've had over the years with jiu-jitsu, like my own personal problems with training partners, and then problems that I've seen happen on the mat are just from poor communication. Like the classic, like you're rolling with somebody and you're feeling kind of tired. So you want to have like a chill out kind of roll and your training partner is in like war zone mode where they just want to go like bonkers on you. And then you both like they roll super hard and then you get mad and you start rolling super hard and then you escalate. And then at the end of it, you're both pissed off at each other, but nobody knows why. And then you don't say anything. And then the next time you see them on the mat, you're like, I don't want to roll with that guy. He was an asshole last time I rolled with him. And then 6 months later, you have somebody that you don't even talk to anymore. But instead of just being like, hey, listen, like today my body's feeling kind of beat up. You mind keeping it kind of light? And then if they still come at you hard, say, hey, like just ease up a little bit. I'm feeling beat up today. And then also being comfortable, like, listen, I'm feeling beat up today. This roll is not going the way that I'd like it to go. I'm going to take a break for a little bit. Like I'm going to go sit on the side of the mat. You can go roll with whoever. And like being able to have those kind of discussions and still be okay with that person, where you're still friends with them and you're still cool with that training partner. I really think it all comes to just having adult communication skills with people.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge.
Yeah.
Now, going back to your shadow grappling, because I love this concept of shadow grappling. And to a lot of people, this is completely foreign, right? And one of my primary early mentors was a Henzo Gracie black belt named Carl Prevec. He's known as the Silver Fox. Yeah. And I love this guy. And he promotes a lot of something similar in the swimming pool, right? At the end of his, I think it's split guard instructional or something. He has a series, and I think on YouTube too, of just him doing all these moves in the swimming pool by himself, these solo sort of things. In addition, I think you've mentioned before dummies also, which is interesting because I remember pre-lockdowns, a lot of people would shit on the use of dummies for a while, and I always would say where I found value in it was initially just trying to get some basic sort of gross motor movements. If you have no concept of, let's say, a triangle whatsoever, how to move an arm and even put your leg up. But not only that, I've found tremendous value post-injury in feeling, when can I get back to grappling with any sort of intensity or to what level can I get back at it just by playing with the dummy saying, oh, no, this hurts too much, right? To get my hip here or there.
Yeah. Yeah. Like almost like you're doing like an audit of your body. When you're doing the dummy, like, okay, I'm rolling with the dummy. I wonder if I can do an arm bar from close guard with the dummy. And then how's that going to feel on that rib that I just popped 3 weeks ago, right? And you try it and you're like, that makes my rib kind of ache a little bit. All right, I'm going to stay away from arm bars from close guard. Could I do an X choke from close guard on a dummy? Yeah, that feels fine on my rib. I think I could do that. Yeah, so it's a good way to do that, like audit. But I think, the other thing too is like, you're right. People do shit on dummy work. And especially now because eco-style training is very popular, which is like literally the opposite of shadow grappling and dummy work. And I think the value that I see in dummy work is like what you just said, and shadow grappling is just like giving yourself that audit of like, how does my body feel? Can I do this if I've been recently injured? And I think also if you're experienced, like the more experienced you are, you can still get good value out of that kind of training, because when you're doing dummy work, it's like you're envisioning a training partner, right? And if you have a lot of experience, you can recall a very rich internal training experience. So if I'm working with a dummy or if I'm shadow grappling, I can envision what it feels like to put my right hand in one of those old school game skis with those big ass thick battle rope collars. And I can feel the fiber of the gi on my knuckles. And I can feel somebody like pulling their neck back to try to avoid the collar grip. I could feel my fingers aching because they just popped the hand out of the collar. And so if you're experienced, you can shadow grapple and you can work on a dummy and create a very rich, useful experience just by visualizing intensely what's going on. And like from skill development perspective, obviously it's not as good as working with a partner, like a human partner, but it doesn't mean that it's without value either. It's a tool. Like you got that tool in your toolbox. For example, when I'm getting ready to compete, we used to have 2 grappling dummies at our school, and the kids ripped the arms off one of them, and then one of the students tore the other one in half. So we don't have them anymore. But when we did have grappling dummies and I was getting ready for a tournament, I would get extra dummy grappling sessions and shadow grappling sessions in because I knew that I could stay injury free. I could get extra volume in that I wouldn't be able to get with a training partner because it's a little bit more fatiguing working with another human being. I knew that with the grappling dummy, I could get, if I'm doing a half guard knee bar and I only do it on my right hip over and over and over again, and I realize, what if I can't get to my right hip? I better learn how to do this on my left hip. I can get 15, 20, 100 reps on a grappling dummy and make sure that my body can do that with coordination and control. And then I feel more prepared for my tournament. And that's not just for competing, but that's for like any kind of grappling. Is it the perfect skill development tool? No, working with another person is, but just because it's not the perfect tool doesn't mean it's not a valuable tool.
Let's talk about your jiu-jitsu a little bit. What do you tend to gravitate towards?
So I started competing again about 3 years ago, and I took a 9-year break from competing, just got back into it 3 years ago, and I'm 45 years old. So I've been doing Masters 3 black belt division, and then this year I'll be doing Masters 4. And so my own personal jiu-jitsu, it was, when I took a break from competing, was primarily like underhook half guard, coyote guard stuff, like sweep, take the back. And I was very, in no-gi, I was very into all the modern leg lock stuff, like heel hooks and juni locks, and now I'm into woj lock. But that's stuff that I can't use in Masters 3 or Masters 4 divisions because heel hooks are not legal in IBJJF tournaments. So for me, my own personal jiu-jitsu, I don't do as much underhook half guard anymore because literally everybody in my division is super well prepared for it. And I still do it. It's still in maintenance mode and I keep it sharp because that opportunity might pop up to use it. But I focused a lot more on doing more kind of young guy jiu-jitsu in the sense of like, if everybody in my division is well prepared for the standard like old guy jiu-jitsu stuff, which is like over under passing, underhook half guard, like really close tight pressure stuff, then I should probably develop a game that's more mid and long range. And so that's what my game has sort of become over the last maybe 2 years, is a lot more focused on like mid-range guard passing, mid-range guard playing on bottom, De La Hiva, lasso, spider, stuff like that. Like I still over under pass, double unders pass, body lock pass, pressure passing, underhook half guard, all that stuff is still in maintenance mode. It's just that I'm trying to shift it more into, I hate calling it younger guy jiu-jitsu, but I think you know what I mean. Like it's the stuff that you would see in like the adult divisions where they're doing like the De La Hiva, berimbolo, crab ride, lasso, spider, those kind of things. So that's kind of what I'm transforming my jiu-jitsu into a little bit.
That's interesting. It reminds me of how I was a terrible beginner student in the sense that, I don't know if it's terrible, but very sort of, I don't know, I've always been a pain in the ass. When I learned close guard, where they start as traditional close guard when I started in a more traditional school, and I would just get stuck there like forever. I just couldn't get out. So I would just refuse to close guard. I'm like, okay, everyone's going to be really good at close guard. So I'm going to try to develop this outside game, right? And it worked, right? Because everyone was so used to let's start in close guard, right? That the open guard game was, at the white belt level was lacking. And so I could take a lot of advantage and develop an outside game early on. But then, you got to develop that close guard sort of game, right? And that how to deal with it. So I'm not saying to poo-poo, but it is interesting how you have to like
rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, like your rock, okay, I can't do rock against rocks. I got to do rock against scissors. And then they're going to try to do, scissors against paper. And like, I can't beat the closed guard. So how can I stay away from the closed guard and work around it? Yeah.
Now, does that drive you crazy as an instructor? If like you see a student and you're like, hey man, we're supposed to be focusing on this, and I see that you're doing sort of the opposite type of thing.
No. I mean, like if it's in class, like if we're doing, for example, we're doing long range guard passing in class right now. So in Monday and Friday class, we're doing long range guard passing. And so if they're in class and they're drilling the techniques for the first half an hour and they're sticking roughly, I like for my students to experiment while they're drilling. So I'd like them to try different grips and not just like, okay, Josh said, put your right hand 18 by 12 degrees north by northwest during the harvest moon. Like there's leeway there. Like they could put their hand on the hip, they could put it on the ribs, they can put it on the belly, like experiment a little bit. But if I'm teaching long range guard passing, all of a sudden I see them doing like barambolas or something like that, then, just stick to what we're doing in class right now, please. And then when they do positional sparring in class, then there's some freedom. I'll give them specific rules during the positional sparring. Like if you're doing long range guard passing, I want you to try to pass the guard without your knees touching the ground. Or I would like you to try to pass the guard, keeping your hands on your partner's legs or hips. But within that framework, there's freedom for them to do stuff. And then if it's during open mat, students can do whatever they want during open mat. I have no, as long as it's safe and it doesn't put their training partners at risk, I have no problem with them doing whatever.
When do you start introducing the leg game?
So we have a leg locks class on Tuesdays every week. As long as you have more than 8 weeks experience in jiu-jitsu, you're welcome to do any of the intermediate and advanced classes. So they could hop in and start doing footlocks with 2 months experience if they want. And even in the fundamentals class, we have 1 week that doesn't finish a footlock, but gets them into a footlock position and shows them what single leg X looks like. And then when I teach fundamentals on Saturday is interesting because we have a fundamentals curriculum that's a 12-week cycle, and it just goes 12 weeks, 12 weeks, 12 weeks, and forever until the end of time. And then on Saturdays, I fill in some of the blanks that are not covered in the 12-week curriculum.
Oh, I was going to ask you about this because I noticed on your schedule that Saturday you have something where there's no drop-ins. There's a block there it looked like a comp class or something. I wasn't sure.
Well, yeah, Sundays are no drop-ins just because that's like my wife and my day off. And we want to make sure that if drop-ins come, that we're there so that we can make sure that the person coming in is cool and they're respectful to the students. But on Saturday, it's different. So Saturdays, it's a fundamentals gi class, but like what I do in that class is I take the stuff, there's always going to be fundamentals that are important for students to learn, but we just couldn't fit into a 12-week curriculum. So I try to take those things and do those in the Saturday class. And so in Saturday class, I've taught footlocks a number of times, like straight ankle locks, where somebody who's training for, sometimes it's their first class and they're doing a very basic straight ankle lock. And so there's really no time limit on footlocks. I would rather somebody who's got like a week of experience not be doing heel hooks, for example, like in sparring, but usually we introduce footlocks very, very early in people's jiu-jitsu.
Your jiu-jitsu. What have you been training as of late?
So lately, I just competed about a month ago. I did no-gi pans, and then I did no-gi worlds right after that. And so what I'm training right now, I did film study, and I broke down all the problems and mistakes that I made in my last tournament. And then what I'm doing now is I'm trying to fix the problems. Like there's technical problems, there's intensity problems. There were some mental things that I wasn't doing. And then there was problems of like how I approached where I was on the mat that I need to fix. So I'm taking all the problems that I noticed in my own performance, and then I'm making projects out of each of those things for myself to do my own 90-day BJJ project on.
Did you originally have like a proclivity in terms of like, were you like a counter puncher, or is that sort of what you are now? I mean, it sounds like you're trying to be more well-rounded, obviously, in years and years of development, but did you have an initial affinity to be a certain type of player?
Yeah, so originally, I think for the first like probably 18 years of my jiu-jitsu, I could be aggressive, but left to my own devices, I'm a pretty mellow guy. And so I would prefer a slow, mellow, counter-punching kind of style. And then what's funny is that over the last 3 years, I don't know if it sounds pretentious to say that I'm like reinventing myself, but like I've tried to like overhaul my jiu-jitsu, and like I don't want to be slow anymore. I don't want to be a counterpuncher anymore. I want to be aggressive, fast, explosive, which is kind of silly because I'm 45 and that's usually not the path that 45-year-olds take. But I feel like, okay, well, if I'm going to be competing regularly again, then against the people that I compete against who are very good, I'm not going to be successful if I play a slow counterpunching kind of game, because if it's a 5-minute match and I'm not intense and alert and sharp and ready to go and I get scored on, like let's say I get double legged, I'm not going to win that match, because there's no way for me to come back from behind against somebody who is just going to hold me down for the rest of the match and not let me get my score back. So I decided that I had to be fast, aggressive, explosive, and really get after it in my jiu-jitsu. And so I started reinventing my jiu-jitsu. I started sprinting twice a week. I started doing a lot more like intense, explosive style of training in my jiu-jitsu, and still staying safe and keeping myself safe and my training partner safe. But I've tried to reinvent my jiu-jitsu in that direction.
Can you give me some examples of like just awesome moments that you've seen, or something that's like really moved you that you've seen within your students, whether it was like at a tournament or in their training and their development at the gym or what it may be?
So I mentioned Tanner earlier, who's one of our fundamentals instructors, and I love this guy. He reminds me of like me when I was a lot younger. Like when he first came into jiu-jitsu, he didn't really seem very sure of himself. And I hope he doesn't feel weird that I'm like saying this about him, but he didn't seem very sure of himself. He was very like quiet, very nice, very respectful, very polite, but quiet. And I didn't get a strong sense of confidence from him. And when I started jiu-jitsu, that's how I was too. I was very like, I didn't feel confident. I felt kind of like anxious and apprehensive, and I didn't have my own voice, and I felt kind of worried and whatever. And I felt that vibe coming from him when he first started. And then over the years, I've watched him go from somebody that I feel like people would roll with him and be like, this guy is not like a tough roll. And he's turned over the years into like one of the most formidable people on the mat. He's confident. He's assertive. He's a fantastic instructor. He's got a brilliant mind for like studying jiu-jitsu and technical knowledge. And he's just completely gone from somebody who, the kind of guy that in a workplace you just know that people would like walk all over him and take advantage of him. And now he's not that guy. And he's not an asshole either. He didn't go the other direction. Like he's an actual cool dude, somebody who is appropriately confident and assertive and just great at jiu-jitsu. And he's one of my toughest training partners. But he didn't go the other direction and turn into like a maniac. So I think he's like the first person that I think of when I get a question like that. Like I'm just so proud of him and I'm so impressed by him. And he is exactly what I would like to see from like every single person that walks in the door of jiu-jitsu. Like I would like to see everybody that comes into jiu-jitsu who needs something in their life blossom into somebody like that, who is like, he's going to reach his potential.
So Josh, was there anything you wanted to cover that we didn't cover?
I guess to sort of circle back to what we started with at the very beginning with the black belt stripes thing, one point that is real important to me about that kind of thing is that when Angie and I opened our gym, we do our own thing. We're not affiliated under anybody. And we do have affiliates that work with us, but we don't consider those affiliates under us. We consider them, they're people that maybe I have a higher belt ranking than, but these are people that work with us that we help in areas that we can help them. Like maybe we have more expertise in like curriculum design or how to market their jiu-jitsu school or how to do business stuff, but they affiliate with us because we can help them grow in that way. But it's not that they're underneath us. And we're more like just more experienced partners in the world of jiu-jitsu. So with the belt stripe thing is like when we opened our school and we weren't affiliated with anybody, we found ourselves in an interesting predicament because like, I don't care about stripes and I don't care if I ever get a 4th degree black belt or a 5th degree or whatever. But for some people that does matter a little bit. And so I use belt checker because it's like a very low maintenance way to like verify my stripes and do it. And then I also do it through the IBJJF because of those reasons. But we are going to remain unaffiliated forever as far as I'm concerned, because I've seen a lot of schools, either they came up under somebody and now they have their own school and they have really strong philosophical differences with that head instructor. And they just, they have to put up with a bunch of bullshit just to get that next stripe on their belt, or they have to put up with a bunch of stuff because that instructor is the only person that can sign off on their athletes for IBJJF. Or even worse, they don't have somebody that they're affiliated with, and they have to connect to somebody that they don't know. And then before you know it, you got some 60-year-old creep that shows up to your school 2 times a year for seminars and is saying crazy shit, maybe hitting on female students or saying really inappropriate stuff or doing really inappropriate things.
Or asking for egregious financial demands or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, like, okay, you got to pay me $10,000 a year. You got to have me down for 3 seminars per year. You got to use my curriculums. You have no autonomy. And so when we opened our school, we're not going to do that. And so you end up in this situation where you're like, okay, well, I don't want to put myself in that position. I never want my students to be in a position where they have to put up with the bullshit from somebody who's saying crazy stuff to them, but I got to put up with it because I got to get my 4th stripe on my black belt. And so how do we navigate past that situation? And Belt Checker has been so useful for that kind of thing. And also like IBJJF as like a secondary outlet for that. But like Belt Checker and Globetrotters, I think is just such a fantastic community for people like me and like Angie, who we don't want to affiliate. We don't want to deal with all the headaches that come with that. Not that, and they're not all bad. I'm just, but I'm saying like in my own experience, I've seen a lot of people that have had problems like that with affiliations.
I think it's the norm right now. And this is why I'm asking a lot about this type of stuff. And plus we get a lot of academy owners that watch and listen to the show. When you get these black belts, their former instructors become former instructors, right? They open their academies, and for whatever reasons, whether it's negative or not, a lot of the times it's just proximity. They move to a different town and they just don't see this individual or communicate with this other individual like they used to. And distance, that happens. And then this degree question starts coming up, and then affiliation question starts coming up. And what a lot of people are not finding tremendous value in affiliation, traditional affiliation, I'd say. And a lot of the examples that you give of like exorbitant costs, strange traditions, strange expectations, and things like that, versus like today, like why, as we're evolving as a business, do I need to do these sort of counterintuitive type of things?
Yeah, and it's wild because like we've been open for over 3 years now, and we've only had one person ask where we got our black belts from. We've only had like maybe one person ask if we're affiliated with a bigger team. Again, nobody really cares. If it's not for like reputation, then it's got to be for something else, right? Like if you're going to affiliate with somebody, it's got to be because you're just new to running a business and you might need help with your business, or you might need help with marketing, or you're just not sure how to design a curriculum. So you need somebody to like either help you design your own curriculums or give you curriculums to follow so that you can teach your students well. Like there has to be like that kind of aspect to it. Like, so that's kind of what we try to do with our affiliates. And what that turns it more into is like, it's like a business partnership that we make with people. I hate the idea like nobody's under us. We're not under anybody else. Like
you're not taking ownership in any way of any. I mean, your price was fantastic. I looked at it and I'm like, wow, this is really great offering.
Thank you. Yeah. And honestly, like it's been great so far because we have 3 affiliates. We have one in Micronesia, one in State College, PA, and then one in Gainesville, Florida. And, we communicate with them regularly. Angie does most of the stuff with like helping give ideas for marketing, business ideas, how to do stuff with merch, hooking people up with better connections for like supplying their merch. I do the stuff with like if they have questions about the jiu-jitsu end of things, how to design programs, how to teach private lessons, how to do their own training, like that kind of stuff I can help with. And, it's been great. And it's nice to have a bigger team. Like I love our affiliates. When we get to meet up with them, it's such a fantastic experience because we're all like-minded people too. As far as like the kind of vibe we want out of jiu-jitsu. I think maybe I came off a little bit too negative with this stuff I was saying about affiliates before, because like I do know people who have good experiences with being affiliated under somebody else. I know people from Dream Art that are super cool. I know people who, have affiliated under like Alliance or other big affiliations, Checkmat, and like they're super happy with their experience with that. So I know it's not all bad. My brother is a Pedro Sauer affiliate. So like it works for some people. It's just that for us, like I think our own personal experiences, there's just been so many instances where like, I've seen some poor school owner that can't say anything, and they have like some old school dude who's coming to their school for a seminar. I know one guy who like offered one of the students a belt if she would sleep with him, and the school owner didn't do anything about it because he doesn't want to break that affiliation. He doesn't want to reprimand an old school jiu-jitsu guy. He wants to get the next stripe on his belt, and it's terrible. And I think maybe that's jaded me a little bit. And so I don't want to come off as too harsh against all affiliations because I think there are definitely good ones. But my own experiences have been pretty bad with that stuff. And so that's kind of why I feel pretty strongly about it.
So Josh, anything else that you wanted to touch on?
I think one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about lately is I saw a thread on Reddit about this recently about extreme sports connected to jiu-jitsu. Like, how many people grew up skateboarding that are into jiu-jitsu or
True.
doing BMX or snowboarding
Right.
or
Surfing. Yeah.
yeah, surfing. And like, I mean, obviously surfing and jiu-jitsu, the connection is huge, right? But, for me, it's been skateboarding, and then how did that relate to jiu-jitsu? And like the interesting thing that I've been thinking about lately is how did growing up skateboarding affect the way that I looked at competitive jiu-jitsu when I started competing? And what's interesting is that when I grew up skateboarding, it was like in the 90s, like the entire 90s, and there was a strong like anti-jock kind of vibe to skateboarding. And it
Yeah.
was still like, okay, I'm one of those dirty skater kids.
Yeah. Very anti-hero. Yeah. Type of, yeah.
Yeah, and like the jocks don't like the skaters and the skaters don't like the jocks, and we're not going to hang out with the football kids because they're, and so then when I started doing jiu-jitsu was very underground still when I started doing it, and it was still kind of like an underground fight club kind of vibe. And so I thought I felt comfortable there because it felt like skateboarding. And then when I started competing in jiu-jitsu, I got exposed to like the sport side of jiu-jitsu, which is jock shit, right? Like, so when you're a kid, you think about sports and you're like, okay, I'm going to do a jiu-jitsu tournament, but damn, am I a jock now? And what was interesting was when I first started competing in jiu-jitsu, I would come at it from a skateboarding mentality where I want to see if I can hit this move on this person. Like, can I make a Peruvian necktie work? Or can I go into this match and like, I wonder if I can hit an armbar here, or if I can hit a kickflip down this 5-stair. And then later on, as I got more comfortable competing, then I stopped hating on jocks because I realized like that's actually a smart way to approach jiu-jitsu, is to treat it like a sport and like, respect the things that sport has to offer. And so what was interesting was it went from me competing and then trying just to see if I could like hit moves in jiu-jitsu tournaments the same way that I would try to like hit tricks at a skate spot. And it turned more into like, okay, how can I organize a training plan that will prepare me for this sporting event over the course of 8 weeks? And then what weightlifting do I have to do? What sprinting do I have to do? And then I tried to retrofit that back into skateboarding. Like, okay, can I take a sport approach and bring it back into my skateboarding? So if I'm going to go skateboarding and I want to get better at this type of trick, then can I put together an 8-week training plan that will help me get this? And the answer for me was no. I can't retrofit sports into skateboarding because I'm just so brainwashed. I'm like, I just got to go skate and I got to go try stuff. It's really weird, but it's a mental block for me. But it's interesting, like those different types of approaches. Because when I see older grapplers, like you remember Bill Cooper? So you watch old Bill Cooper matches, or like grapplers like Gary Tonnen, people like that. Like they grapple like skateboarders. Like they would just try shit. And like they had a very loose, experimental, fun approach. And they would just get on the mat. And like, I'm sure they had a plan of sorts, but like they looked like they were just like, fuck it. I'm going to go for a flying guillotine here and see what happens.
It's funny that you mentioned skateboarding because when I think of skateboarding, I associate it with punk rock, right?
Yeah.
And my youth was punk rock, skating, surfing. So I've always had an anti-authority type of lean, which has served me in one way and not in the other. And so when, as you mentioned too, with jiu-jitsu, it did seem like a very sort of anti-establishment type of thing in the early days. And funny how things change. So with the punk rock ethos of DIY, right? Do it yourself. I've always had that type of thought process too. And one of like the early advice I give to white belts is take ownership. Take ownership of your jiu-jitsu as soon as you can, because you can't completely rely on your instructor, right, for everything. But you do have to take ownership and explore and test the boundaries of things and do it yourself, right? So it always aligned with that thought process for me. But also realizing later on the formality, you said, of sports and the development of sports and how they're thinking about it. And now I'm like, oh yeah. So some of that does make sense. Some of this regimented approach sometimes can add as well to your personal development within jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, and it's interesting because like that, I love that point that you just made about DIY, because when I first started doing jiu-jitsu, if I could coach myself, like if 45-year-old me could coach 23-year-old me, I would not listen to me. Even though like I feel like I know what I'm talking about now, when I was 23 years old, I didn't have the mental toolkit to listen to anybody. And so like I kind of had to like DIY my own jiu-jitsu. And I was like, I'm going to do it this way because this is not working for me. I got to organize my own stuff. I want to do this. I want to do that. And like, I would take some advice from people, and I wasn't a complete asshole, meaning like, if somebody gave me advice, I wouldn't tell them to go like leave me alone or anything, but like I would listen. But like in my heart, I was like, I'm going to do it my way. Yeah, it's just so interesting because like, yeah, as you get older, you transform. Like I found myself transforming more into that. Like there's this DIY, yeah, I'm going to throw some concrete down and build this kind of ramp and a ledge here and I'm going to skate, and then now I'm like, the skate park that the city built and it's got organized this degree lean in the ramp and it's like more structured. I think for most people, like the approaches mix together somehow. For example, like the guy George I mentioned earlier, he's our takedowns instructor. And George is an artist. His jiu-jitsu, if I put together like a structured training plan for him, that's just not how he works. But if he's like completely untethered, then that doesn't work either. So for him, you just give him a direction. You say, George, go north. And he is so creative with the way that he approaches jiu-jitsu that he'll figure out a way to make that work and like, use his body in a creative way. And he needs some direction, but it can't be too regimented. He's very much like an artistic DIY kind of person, but there does have to be a skeleton there for him. There's got to be like something of a structure. And then there's other students where it's like everything is structure and there's not a lot of wiggle room. That's why everybody's a little different, I guess, right?
Yeah. That's my thing I always say too, is like, it's hard to realize late in life that everyone learns differently, whether it's like the verbose Danaher sort of approach of highly technical, or like these Henzo Gracie fun, exuberant, sort of loosely kind of telling you things of what to do, or like Brandon McCaffrin with this Southern sort of charm and draw, very succinct, brief instruction that gravitates to some people. Everyone receives information differently, and at different times in their lives differently as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point too, because like, the 23-year-old you is not the same as the 45-year-old you, right? So like, the 23-year-old me that was completely uncoachable and just wanted to do things his own way. Now, I think I would thrive if I had a sport coach that I really respected and like could guide me on a specific path. I think I would function well in that structure. But 23-year-old me, no way, wouldn't work. Maybe 40-year-old me, it wouldn't work either. Maybe at 45, this is the time that I need that kind of thing.
It's interesting because then I go back to thinking about you in the sewers of New Jersey, having fun in this unstructured play and playing in a place that is very unconventional, right? And non-traditional, but you found like some of your most joy.
It's so funny because it's like, I know people are going to listen to that and be like they're going to like heckle me about it a little bit. Like, yeah, that's your fun. Go play in the sewers of New Jersey. But it really is just like, you ever see that movie, the Stephen King movie?
Yeah.
And there's like latchkey kids, like you go outside.
Yeah, that's what I was.
Yeah, me too. Like you play all day and you get into these like adventures. For them, like they would go ride their bikes all day and there was no cell phones, so you can't get in contact with them.
Let's explain what latchkey, because a lot of people, kids especially now, don't understand what that even is. And typically what that was it's referring to a child that they're typically single parent or parents were gone all day and they were literally left with a necklace with an actual key to your front door, right? And so a lot of these kids that would hang around their neck or wherever it may be, and so they would refer to them as latchkey kids because they would come home from school by themselves to a house by themselves and they just kind of find their own way.
Yeah. So that's great because I know what it is, but I didn't know the story behind it. So that's awesome. So in that movie and the book, you have these kids that are latchkey kids and they're doing the normal latchkey kid stuff. They're riding bikes all day from sun up to sundown and they're getting in the dirt and they're going and playing in the woods. And one of them falls out of a tree and they get cut on their face and they're bleeding and they rub dirt into it. But then it's a really dark story because there's this killer clown, right? But like, that's part of the adventure is like when I was a kid, there were some woods near our apartment complex and there was the sewers, right? And so you go in the woods and you go climb trees and then you go far enough in the woods and you start finding crazy stuff. And so to me, like that's what the sewer thing is about, where like, we go to the sewer and then you look down that little hole in the sewer and you're like, oh man, that's dark. That's scary. What's down there? And then your imagination gets captured. And just like in it, where like in their sewer, there was a killer clown from Spades. Like when you're a little kid, you start creeping down that sewer and you're 15, 20 feet in that dark sewer and you think you hear something and you start to get scared. And then your friend who's outside of the sewer starts yelling crazy shit like killer clowns are coming. And then you freak out and you and your brother start running out of the sewer and you run all the way home and your heart's beating. And like, it's just that like fun adventure,
So any of you watching, listening out there, let us know if you played in the sewers. All right. Just in the comments, type in sewers,
Yeah. And for all legal purposes, we're not recommending that you go play in this.
So, Josh, where can we get more information about you and everything you've been up to?
Our website is jujitsuphilly.com for our school and like the goings on of our school. We also have jujitsumerch.com, which is our jiu-jitsu clothing brand. And on Instagram, it's the Jiu Jitsu Company. You can follow Josh R. Vogel, Angela Vogel, who's my wife. She's Anfluencer on Instagram. Facebook, same thing, Josh Vogel, the Jiu Jitsu Company. We have a YouTube channel, or a Jiu Jitsu Company YouTube channel that this is actually kind of interesting. You might get a kick out of this. So we have normal like jiu-jitsu content where I'll share some technique videos and stuff. But a few years ago, I fell in love with like walking tour videos where like people will like do a walking tour of like Barcelona or something. And so I started making walking tour videos of Philadelphia where I'm just walking around the city and I'm talking about jiu-jitsu stuff. And like, I'm not that interesting, but you know, you might get a kick out of that. And if you don't want to hear my voice, you can just watch the video on silent and see what Philadelphia looks like. So we're going to try to expand that channel a little bit more this year.
All right, everyone. Well, I'm your host, Adolfo Fronda. Thank you so much for watching, listening out there. Feel free to become a VIP member subscriber, get early access to stuff and so on. Subscribe, like, and share with your friends. Josh, thanks so much for your time. Please say hello to Angie for me, and all the best with the Jiu Jitsu Company. It looks like an amazing place. I hope I can be there sometime in Philly.
Yeah, and I'd love to have you come. If you're ever around or anybody else is ever around, come on by.
Awesome, guys. We'll see you guys next time.